Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Jonathan Sao, MPP for Don Valley North, and I'm pleased to be joined this afternoon with Mr. Bruce McIntosh from the Ontario Autism Coalition, David Lepofsky from Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act Alliance, and Julia Marie Evangelisto, Ontario Parents for Education Support. And today we're here to talk about the impact of the removal of trustees on special education supports provided to students. So I'll turn it over at this time to Bruce. Bruce?
Thanks, Jonathan. Good afternoon. As Jonathan said, my name is Bruce McIntosh, and I'm a parent of 2 adults with disabilities. And because of that, I was the founding president of the Ontario Autism Coalition 20 years ago, and I remain a board member. We've spent those 20 years advocating to improve services for children of all ages with autism. With me is to my far left and your far right, Julia Evangelisto. She, too, is the parent of 2 children with disabilities, and she's co-chair, as Jonathan said, of Ontario Parents for Education Support. They're a grassroots organization of parents of students with disabilities who advocate for better supports for their kids in school. And to my immediate left, your right, David Lepofsky, also a parent of a child with disabilities. He's speaking today as the chair of the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. David led the 10-year campaign that led to the passage of the AODA, and he's also chair of the Toronto District School Board's Special Education Advisory Committee, or SEAC. Number your pages. Our organization's united to speak out for the urgent needs of at least 250,000 students in Ontario-funded schools with a physical, mental health, sensory, neurological, learning, or other disability. For years, they've been second-class citizens in Ontario schools. Recent developments at the provincial level have made things worse, and the way they are unfolding at this moment makes us believe that they will continue to worsen. Today, we're launching a nonpartisan blitz to do something about it. Controversy is increasing, swirling around the Ford government seizing control of 5 school boards, ousting their elected school board trustees, and the government is flirting with abolishing elected trustees right across Ontario. Now, in this new world, you got to ask yourself, what can a frustrated, anxious, beleaguered parent do if their school tells their child with disabilities that the child may not come to school? Not because they were subject to any discipline, but because the student's education assistant is away sick. What can a parent do when they're told they have to take the day off work to go on a field trip with their child? Because if they don't, their child will miss that part of their education because the school can't keep them safe. What's a parent to do if the school board won't agree to give their child supports they need? Where are they to go for help if the board agreed to give a support but aren't living up to their word? Who's the parent to go to for help if they learn that the school has put their child in an isolation room without their consent, without even telling them, and without supervision? Parents are experiencing all of these things, or are afraid of them, as the OAC learned in its last 2 surveys of special education families. In fact, during the 24-25 school year, 28.4% of more than 650 respondents told us they had turned to their trustee for help. At a school board where there are no elected trustees to call and no live-streamed school board public meetings to make delegations to, and a government-appointed supervisor who doesn't respond to calls and emails, the school board bureaucrats, the director of education, the associate directors, the executive superintendents, all become an unaccountable law unto themselves. There's really only one elected politician left for these anxious parents to turn to for help, and that's Minister of Education Paul Calandra. Now, Mr. Calandra has appointed supervisors in ultimate charge of the 5 school boards he has targeted. These supervisors report directly to the minister's office. So the minister is now in a position of micromanaging school boards, and he has far more authority to direct action in schools than elected trustees ever had. He's become Ontario's Uber trustee. Now, we call on parents of students with disabilities who need help for their child at school to call or email Ontario's super trustee, Education Minister Paul Calandra. You better call Paul. Tell him how your school is not meeting your child's disability-related learning needs. Tell him what to order your school board to do to fix this. Better call Paul. His office number is 416-325-2600, and his email is minister.edu@ontario.ca. Has your school board told your child they can't come to school at all or only stay part of the school day? You better call Paul. Have you asked for your child to have a special needs assistant to make sure they're safe throughout the school day? But the school said no because they don't have enough staff. Better call Paul. Did you find out, to your horror, that the school put your child in a padded isolation room without your consent, without staff monitoring their safety? You better call Paul. Did your school send you an individual education plan that says what they will do to meet your child's disability-related needs, but fail to do what they promised? Better call Paul. Did your school board increase the size of your child's special education class in a way that makes it harder for your child to learn? Better call Paul. Did your school board choose to eliminate your child's special education class and abandon them in a mainstream classroom with no support? Better call Paul. If you email the minister, please send a copy to our grassroots campaign. Our email is really easy to remember. 2025 bettercallpaul@gmail.com. If you phone him, please drop us an email to tell us that you did that. Now, we're not just addressing parents of students with disabilities in the 5 school boards that Premier Ford seized. There's a real possibility that the government is planning to get rid of elected school boards across Ontario. Mr. Calandra will become the mega trustee for all Ontario's publicly funded schools. And we invite parents of students with disabilities everywhere in Ontario to call Paul. Ask Minister Calandra to solve your child's problems at school. Even if the government hasn't yet stripped your elected trustees of their positions, all parents, whether their child has a disability or not, better call Paul now to get their students' barriers to learning solved at their school so they can get a hands-on experience with the new world that the Ford government is now considering for us all. So now let's hear from Julia about the plight facing parents of students with disabilities.
Thank you. For years now, parents of students with disabilities have been stuck in the middle of conflicting messages. School boards say the province isn't giving enough money to meet the needs of students with disabilities. The province says boards are getting more than ever. And families like ours, we're standing in the crossfire, forced to fight for our kids' basic rights, an education that meets their needs, while schools are left trying to fill the gaps they were never built to handle. What we know is this. Too often, our kids' needs are not being met in school. And I want to be clear. Educators want to do the right thing. Teachers, EAs, principals, they all care deeply. But they're working in a system that simply isn't keeping up with the needs of the students inside the schools. There is no roadmap when navigating childhood disability. Potential diagnoses, specialists, therapies, or the long delays in services that leave families and schools scrambling. We figure it out ourselves, usually by ourselves. It's overwhelming and it's exhausting. It can stretch families to the breaking point, mentally, emotionally, financially. We are burnt out. Some parents are juggling multiple children with different disabilities. Some are single parents or caring for aging parents at the same time as their own disabled children. Some are newcomers to this country and are unaware of how to navigate the system or face language barriers that prevent them from accessing supports. This is everyday life for so many families across this province. And instead of trusting that the school system and ultimately the government will meet their child's needs, parents have had to become navigators and advocates just to get their child's basic needs met. They have to figure out what supports even exist, whether their child qualifies, who to talk to, and how to push for it. Too often, by the time parents finally get answers, the support being advocated has arrived only partially, if it arrives at all, and valuable time has been lost, leaving children with disabilities overwhelmed and under-supported in schools. And when parents hit a wall, they should be able to call an elected official, like a trustee, who can cut through the confusion and get real answers. That's the bare minimum families deserve. Our kids don't get do-overs. Every year matters. We're speaking here today to make sure the voices of parents and families are finally heard. Thank you.
I have the privilege of serving as chair of the Toronto District School Board's Special Education Advisory Committee. TDSB is not only Ontario and Canada's largest school board. We serve over 40,000 students with disabilities and special education needs. That's more kids than some school boards have in total. That is an incredible opportunity for the rest of Ontario to learn what they might be in for if there are no longer any elected trustees, to provide public, independent oversight of what the education bureaucracy is doing with their kids and with our tax money. Let me give you some idea, because we're seeing what's happened so far. Before the end of June and the provincial government seizing control of school boards, if you were a parent of a child with a disability or special education need, and you weren't happy with how things were going, and you tried advocating in the bureaucracy, you had several avenues to go publicly to try to get some help. You could go before a committee of the school board, of the trustees, meet in person or virtually, and go and present your problem as a delegation. You would do this and it would be live streamed. So you could then link to that video and use social media to share it. You could go to a meeting of the entire board of trustees and make a delegation. Again, in public, often monitored by the media, and live streamed. And you could then take that video and use it to try to advocate publicly to make things better. All gone. If you were a parent of a child which the principal of your school has refused to admit to school for a day or a week or months under the Education Act, which they have sweeping power to do with virtually no provincial restraints on when they can do it. And if you are unhappy with this happening to your child, you have the right under the Education Act to bring an appeal to the school board, a public meeting, again, with all this public scrutiny, where the school board staff have to answer publicly for what they're doing. Well, there are no trustees to go to, and no school board meetings in public, or at all, to appear at. All gone. What's left? What is left? Oh, pardon me. There was more. trustees routinely held public ward meetings where you could raise your concerns or you could call the trustee directly. Now, this is not to guarantee the trustees could solve everything. There were certainly problems with the existing system that could benefit from reform. But heck, mend it, don't end it. This has all been abolished. And what's been replaced is an email address to write the provincially appointed supervisor. Now, with respect to those supervisors, they just got parachuted in, and they don't have the resources or perhaps the expertise to investigate and solve these problems. This is no substitute for what we have lost. There is one forum left for public meetings where issues of concern to parents of students with disabilities and special education needs could go, and where their concerns can be the subject of advocacy. And that is the required Special Education Advisory Committee of each school board. Now, let me be clear. We can't decide anything. We can't order anything. All we can do is give advice. But for years, for decades, we've met in public. I've been on the TDSB's Special Education Advisory Committee for a decade now, and have been chair for last year and this and 2 earlier years. We've always met in public. We always welcome delegations from individual parents, and we raise concerns of our own and have lively, fulsome, frankly, intelligent and thoughtful discussions with staff. We don't always agree, but we put our advice forward, and then we could take it to the trustees. Oops, can't do that anymore either. This is the world we now live in. And things are bad enough, but they're getting worse because our Special Education Advisory Committee and the ones at each of the 5 boards may no longer have our meetings live streamed. We meet in public, but if you don't have the time to drop everything, forget feeding your kids and maybe putting them to bed, drive all the way across Toronto and get to 5050 Yonge Street by tonight at 7 o'clock to watch our meeting, which I think describes most parents of kids with disabilities, you're not going to know what happened. You're not going to be able to watch it. The live stream is gone. Now, the minister is the one who ordered this. Why? He gave a series of reasons, and they're all nonsense. Oh, they need to cool down the meetings. The temperature's fine. The conversations are fulsome. Not always. We don't always agree, but even where we disagree, we're not disagreeable. He's never been to one of these meetings. Wouldn't have a clue what the temperature is, and he can't watch the live stream of them because he canceled them. He said that we've got to make sure that parents, we heard there may be privacy concerns. Well, we make sure that kids' names aren't mentioned and privacy concerns are respected. No one's complained about that. These are inventions after the fact. The bottom line is the government is now can't blame anybody else for what goes on at our board. It can't blame the trustees because the government's running the board. And that means, heck, better not live stream a meeting where parents of kids with disabilities or their representatives might be discussing the problems that we're facing. Now, all of that should be bad enough. It gets worse. Because the only thing left to inform the public about what advice we give is the minutes of our meetings. And the TDSB senior staff have now intervened with us to say they want to shorten and put in far more general and vague terms, my words, not theirs, our minutes. Well, that's cutting off the last avenue. So the effect of all of this is it hurts parents and it hurts kids, and all it does is protects the world that we have now learning about, the tyranny of the education bureaucracy. Let me conclude by just saying there's a real passing irony about what's going on in the province. We know that the province is looking seriously at taking more control over more school boards, including the contents of its Bill 33, which is, I gather, about to be passed next week as a result of time allocation or closure. This is all about the province taking more control. It wants more control to tell the school boards what to do or to direct it all itself. Well, heck, it's had a remarkable, comprehensive power to dramatically direct what goes on at school boards for students with disabilities. We fought for the province to have that power. It's under the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. The province can enact an education accessibility standard and set standards for what kids with different disabilities are entitled to receive and how to remove and prevent barriers in the school system that they face. And the board, the government received a report of an expert panel made up equally of disability sector representatives and educators that the government appointed. It received a report with a complete blueprint of what needs to be passed. I had the privilege of serving on that panel. It got that report at the end of January 2022, and it has enacted nothing. So it's busy trying to get more control, but on the other hand, where it's got control and where we're asking for it to exercise it, it's absolutely absent without leave. So in a province where the future looks, the brave new world looks to be possibly having that uber trustee, that super trustee, that mega trustee who's going to replace all the other elected people we could go to, there's only one solution for parents. Better call Paul. Thank you very much, and we'd be happy to take questions.
We spoke with the Premier this morning, and he's standing by the removal of trustees, basically said they need to be held accountable and they're wasting taxpayer dollars. What is your response to that?
There's a healthy discussion we could all be having about what kind of democratic oversight we need at our school boards. I would argue that there is a problem with our trustee system, but it's not the one the government's talking about. It's actually the opposite. The fact of the matter is, what I've seen at the Board of Trustees at the Toronto District School Board, and I suspect this is consistent across the province, is that they were so cowed by the senior staff. They were told they can't make any decisions about operational things. That means everything that goes on in schools. They were, when we would go and present to the trustees and say, we need a reform here, your school board isn't adequately informing parents what's available for kids with disabilities and how to access them. The trustees were told by staff, oh, that's operational. When we said parents can't find an effective way to, or don't have an effective way to try to resolve problems if their child's disability-related needs aren't being met, could you please direct the development of options that would fix this? Senior staff of the Board of Trustees said, oh, that's operational. When the senior staff wanted to raise the number of students in certain special education classes, and we protested, the trustees were told, oh, you can't decide that's a bad idea. That's operational. What the heck are they there for? So the solution isn't take them away. It's empower them to actually overcome the tyranny of the education bureaucrats. And the education bureaucrats may be very well intentioned, but I got to tell you, as somebody who worked in the public service myself for 33 years, there's a tendency by all bureaucrats to try to flex their muscle and broaden their mandate and avoid oversight. None of this is unique to any individual, and none of it's surprising. That's why in a democracy, you need democratic oversight. Trustees could do that, but the system would benefit from a reform. What's unfortunate is that the government has not approached our three organizations and held an open public consultation on alternatives to ensure local democracy, but more effective oversight.
contacting trustees for help, for support?
I know that within my membership of our group, families are contacting trustees regularly to resolve issues. I myself, my kids just started kindergarten, so I have contacted my trustee in the first few months that we've had in school so far, but families are overwhelmingly contacting trustees to help negotiate, mediate between difficulties between the school boards, the schools not giving the supports that they need. They're talking to the principals, trying to resolve it with the superintendent. It's coming back and forth, and the trustee is the intermediary between the parents and the school board in order to resolve situations that need more attention. So definitely they are contacting them on a regular basis for that support, and I would argue that trustees' work is a lot of it has to do with special education concerns, because that is our level of government that we can go to access that support, to advocate for us. Without that trustee or this oversight, there is nobody. The supervisors in the 5 appointed boards are not responsive. They're not responding to emails or calls or parent queries, even organizational queries. They're not responding to anyone. And in fact, I just sat with my MPP on Friday and said, like, is this going to cause more demand on your office? And this is something that your office has been set up to handle. This is the work of the trustees. This is their expertise. And they need to be in that role and given the power and authority to do their job well, so that they can serve the communities.
Short of questions not being answered and sort of like the bureaucratic mess that this has created, can you talk to the boards that are under supervision, the sort of tangible effects that's had on children with special needs or children at large?
Can I tell you here's the problem. It's really hard to find some things out. So let me give you just an illustration. Last spring we heard, as I mentioned before, that the staff at the TDSB wanted to increase the sizes of 2 categories of special education classes. They said that it had nothing to do with money. They wanted to reallocate staff so they could have more of their special ed staff supporting kids with disabilities in the regular class. So we raised serious concerns. They stuck to their guns. We then went to the trustees. And the first time we ever got the trustees to vote our way was in June, where they voted not to approve this increase in class size. And this is after the staff tried. This is all on live stream, by the way, because back then it was still going on and you could see it. You could go check it all out. But the senior staff of the board tried everything they could do to try to tell the trustees they can't really block this. I can go into more details, but I don't want to burden you with it here. But in any event, as soon as the supervisor was appointed, we got a decision within a month from the supervisor in the board that he reversed that decision so that class sizes could be increased. I wrote the associate director, I can give you the correspondence, to say, could you tell us how many classes had the size increased and how many students were affected? Because this could be a tempest in the teapot. It may just be a couple of classes, or it could be a much broader thing. What's the actual impact? And that's the kind of thing trustees could have asked at a board meeting and pushed for. And I got a non-responsive answer that basically said that's operational. By the way, they used to always answer us on operational things. And we could file a freedom of information request, which, by the way, there goes time, and they'll tell us it costs a lot of money, whereas in the past they would have answered it. I've asked it again at the October meeting of our Special Education Advisory Committee, and I've said I want an answer, and I'm going to ask again tonight at a meeting that you can only watch if you attend in person, because it won't be live streamed. Do you follow me? We can't get how much of an impact this is going to be having, in part, is something which the education bureaucracy has a monopoly on the information. and is clamping down on what we can see.
I follow up on that with, this isn't unique to the TDSB. The supervisor in the Ottawa Carleton Board, who happens to be a failed Conservative candidate, not just once, when he took office, he sent a general email to all parents, giving his phone number and his email address, committing to, hear their concerns and meet with them if necessary. And we can find one instance of a parent that actually succeeded in getting a meeting. And that person was Kate Dudley Logue, who has told me that she made more than one phone call and sent more than one email. And it was not until she told Mr. Plamondon that she was vice president of the Ontario Autism Coalition that he deigned to meet with her. And if you're wondering the impact that his presence has had on special education generally, the Ottawa Carleton Board had a long public consultation process and a fairly rancorous debate on whether to change school boundaries and keep special education as it was or not. And it turned out that had they done this, it would have actually saved money. But Mr. Plamondon and the trustees voted to make those changes and preserve spec ed. And we were really happy about that. And one of Mr. Plamondon's first acts was to reverse those changes, made by democratically elected trustees having consulted the community and received input that would save money and preserve spec ed for kids. And he just overturned it by fiat. That's not okay. That's not okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, we can't put up with this. And this is, I mean, you've heard from David. I give you another example. There is no shortage of these examples. And this is with only 5 boards under supervision. If this cancer grows, we're all in for a great deal of trouble.
A year ago, November, this month, our Special Education Advisory Committee, with great cooperation from the senior staff, held a 2-hour town hall for parents of students with disabilities and special education needs. And we asked parents 2 things. What barriers do your kids face at school? And what could be done about it? What could the board do about it? And we heard from several dozen parents. It was a wrenching evening. I had trouble sleeping that night after the stories I heard. And none of it should have been news to me. But seeing parents in tears or virtually in tears as they related the battles they've fought, and they were understanding of the hardworking teaching staff and understanding of the challenges that the school boards face. So we've told the board that we'd like to have and we had several trustees at that meeting who volunteered to come to watch and learn. And I got really good feedback from parents. We got really good feedback from trustees. Well, January of this year at one of our meetings, the associate director announced that they opposed holding another one of these town halls this year or next year. Why on earth? So I've now asked the supervisor to intervene on this. I don't know what's going to happen with that, but the fact is, had the trustees been there, I would have been appearing at one of their board meetings on television, or I should say on live stream, and I would have been sending you the links to the discussions after. I'm confident the staff would say, oh, this is a matter of operations. But there may be just enough pressure there at that public forum. Now, the only thing you're going to be able to do if you want to find out about the discussion of it tonight is come to 50/50 Young from 7 to 9 tonight for our Special Education Advisory Committee. It's the only way you'll find out.
The elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario said back in March that special education in the province was already in crisis. So, I'm wondering, even in a world where proper funding was in place for services and timely assessments and that sort of thing, how big a deal would it be to lose trustees?
Do you mind if I take this?
Well,
You go ahead.
let me
You go
just
first.
jump in quickly.
Go ahead.
The funding problem is not the fault of trustees. The funding problem is not the fault of school staff or, frankly, even board staff. It is the fault of Paul Calandra and previous ministers of education and the provincial government. And in stifling the free and open public discussion of these matters, frankly, it's Paul Calandra's thin skin. He doesn't want the criticism. He'd just as soon that it all be covered up and the cuts continue to happen without any public scrutiny. That's honestly my personal opinion about what this is about. His thin skin has gotten in the way of his better judgment.
Let me offer this. There are two problems with the system. One is funding, no question. But the other is that we have an education system that is designed and operated top to bottom as if it were only for kids without disabilities. Then they lay on what they call special education afterwards. This isn't just my view. It's the view of this expert panel, the Kindergarten to Grade 12 Standards Development Committee report that the government's been sitting on for over 3.5 years. That report details what the barriers are and offers a roadmap to fix them, a practical, workable roadmap that we developed over 4 years with extensive interaction with the Ministry of Education and other sources. But the problem is the government, which seems to be so concerned to take more and more control over the board and micromanaging things from how big the special ed classes are in Toronto to what school names we use, getting into that kind of micromanagement of the minister's office, the minister could tomorrow direct his staff to develop work with the Minister for Accessibility and develop the education accessibility standard they demanded when they were in opposition at our request. And they could make a huge difference. But they're not doing that. So I don't have any confidence things are going to get better if they take more control when they're not using the control they already have.
Aside from trustees, is there anyone else in the system tasked with advocating for students with disabilities at the local level?
Us.
There is no one within the school systems, if that's what you're asking.
There are, yeah, go ahead.
Within the structure of the school boards, parents take that on as themselves and build community around each other. That's how the Ontario Autism Coalition came about. That's how my group, Ontario Parents for Education Support, came about, is we are on islands all by ourselves trying to navigate this system in a storm around us, and we don't know where we're going. And the impact is, for kids, is that in classes that, let's say, used to be a cap of 6 students, year after year, that has increased. So maybe now 8 students, maybe 10 students, maybe we're sitting at 12 students. That's double that it was originally supposed to start at. And so when we go to trustees and say, our kids require a smaller class setting, more specified to their disability type, there is not enough classes for our students, our children to go to. They're reducing the amount of classes year after year. Because if you think about it from a financial perspective, it's a lot more expensive to put 6 students in a class than it is to put 12 or 15 or 25. And so our kids are looked at as a high budget item, but really they're not getting an education otherwise, because that's why those classes were designed in the first place. And so if we're not meeting the needs in the schools, by having specialized classes, by having educational assistants that work with the students so that they can succeed in mainstream classes. Right now, educational assistants are overburdened. They're overstretched. They might have a caseload of up to 8 kids or more of different disabilities that they're supposed to help. Educational assistants are the only ones in the schools that are allowed to do toileting and changing. So if there's somebody that's absent, a child might not be changed for the whole day. That's undignified. That's not what we should be doing in order to support students and support children. So if we're thinking about the needs in the schools, trustees are there and have been there for us to advocate, to continue to have these classes, to continue to have supports. And when their decisions are being overturned by ministry-appointed supervisors who do not have a democratic elected voice, that's where we are going to run into issues, and our children are going to be the ones that are going to pay the price.
Let me just add. Sorry.
David, we've run to time,
Yeah.
I'm afraid. I hate to do this.
Yeah, no.
And
I need to add one
going
thing
to be
for-
the bad guy
You're
to take it off of Jonathan, but
Let me add one thing for completeness, because I want to make sure what I said is not taken out of context by somebody. The other folks that are institutionally in place to advocate for us are special education advisory committees. That's what they're there for. And that's exactly whose live streaming is being curtailed, in our case, whose minutes are being reduced, and who's there for, and whose capacity to even hold a town hall to hear from parents is being impeded. So, and that's the only thing extrinsic to the board.
So I just wanted to make one point, I think, to your question, that look, what we're seeing here today is that parents and students are struggling already, right? To the tune of $850 million shortfall in funding for special education. So we have parents and students who are already struggling. Now, when you take away the trustees, who are the parents now supposed to turn to for help? That's the question. And that's the question that this Minister of Education and this government has failed to answer so far.
you better call Paul. That's the message. And thank you all for attending.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And thank you for hosting.